One thing I was thinking about a lot in terms of what to talk about today is order of approach and pacing on the logical reasoning section, because games and reading comp, they're grouped. If you invest a bit in the game or you invest a bit in the passage, that pays off throughout the rest of that grouping of questions. But logical reasoning, they're bite-sized, and so they're independent from each other, which means that they should not carry across from one to the next. Like your understanding of 19 should not affect your understanding of 20. But unfortunately, it does sometimes if you're stressing out about 19 because things didn't click for you. If you were investing minute after minute in question 19 and you're not making headway, adrenaline starts to pump, your heart's racing a bit, and you start to worry about that throughout the rest of the exam. As you do questions 20 to 26, as you do future sections in the exam, you're still thinking about number 19. And so I want you to reframe your approach. You don't need to get every question right to get a great score. The people who get a 170, they're typically getting perfect, maybe -1 on games, -3 on each of the LRs, and -3 on reading comp. So you don't need LR perfection. I'm not saying you shouldn't try for it, but what I am saying is that you shouldn't feel too invested in any one logical reasoning question, especially because they're independent. What you can do is you can flag 3 to 5 questions in the section, the toughest ones, and come back to this later. I got a 175 and I still do that now. If I see a question, maybe it's a parallel or principal application that takes up half the page, I'll say, you know what, I don't want to deal with that right now, maybe later. If it's question 9, I might do it in the moment because the method of reasoning will probably be simple. But if it's 19, 20, 21, that's as tough as it gets. So given that everything's worth the same, why focus so much on that one question? Similar if it's science and you're more of a humanities pre-law person like I am, or maybe it's formal abstract language. You can get better at those, but in the moment, you don't need to focus on them. Maybe questions 23 to 25 are going to be a little bit easier, and you can always come back to those tough ones later. Logical reasoning has a general order of difficulty, but not a perfect order of difficulty. So skipping around, coming back later is totally fine. One of the cool things about the digital LSAT is that you will be able to flag questions, and you'll see at a glance everything you flagged to come back to later. When it comes to getting better at those tough questions involving abstract or formal language, they come up only every now and then. Most LR questions are more informal and real-world relatable, but if they start using terms like antecedent and consequent, you're in trouble a lot of the time. Even if you understand the method of reasoning or the flaw they're describing, you might not recognize it with LSAC's wording. They use confusing wording on purpose, right? So one thing you can do is set aside every question that uses abstract wording. This is typically flaw questions and role of the statement questions. And so if you set aside all of those and do them in a row, you'll train yourself to define those words and phrases for yourself, turning them from LSAC's language into your language. So if antecedent and consequent are actually just referring to necessary and sufficient conditions, wouldn't it be nice to know that and not try to define it on test day for the first time? You can do that now. There's nearly 100 released exams, 86 of which are numbered. And even if you were only studying from 10 of those exams, that would be enough to define all the words and phrases you need. But it's worth taking the time to do that, not just glossing over it and saying, oh yeah, I get it now, and moving on. Or if you're using explanations, whether they're video or written, that's just one person's take on it. It's not the only way to solve a question, and you also don't want to be using those as a crutch. So they're great if you're totally clueless, you want to get someone else's take on it, but ultimately, your own review process, actually looking up words online. You Google the word antecedent, and you can see what it means, but actually taking the time to do that is really valuable. I talked about review already, so I won't go into it again, but I will say that analyzing the wrong answer choices and the patterns in the tricks they use is extremely important.